G'day everyone and welcome to episode 10 of Practical Powerlifting. Today I'm doing something a little bit different for the very first time. I'm going to run a solo episode. I know I'm a little bit nervous about it because to yap on by myself for a little while may be a challenge, but it might end up being a little bit easier than I was expecting, and I might want to go over time. So we will see how we go. Before we get into things, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our major sponsor. Spoiler alert, there is no sponsor. The sponsor is me. So if you're looking for some powerlifting coaching, if you're looking for some help with your training, want to get things on the right track, want to improve, sort things out, prepare yourself for another competition. Maybe you've got nationals coming up. I know Open Nationals and Masters Nationals and Junior Nationals, of course, are all coming up next year in February and April, at least here in Australia or wherever you are. Get in contact. All my details, I mean, you should know where to find them. Send me an email and we can get things started. We can organize a free consult where you can find out a little bit more what's involved and get things underway. On to today's episode. This is episode 10, as I said, and I thought what I wanted to do is reflect back on the first 10 episodes or the first 9 episodes of Practical Powerlifting. There are some stats out there and I don't know how reliable they are, mainly because I don't remember them, so I'm just making them up. But roughly paint the picture that most podcasts don't make it very far. I think some percentage don't make it past episode 3, and an even smaller episode make it past episode 10. So although 10 episodes isn't a lot, for me, it does feel like something worth celebrating. And I thought one way to do so is to reflect back on the first 9 episodes. We had some awesome guests. Obviously, a lot of them are my friends and people I've worked with before, people who I look at as my colleagues in the powerlifting industry, and all Australians. And so what I want to do is reflect and think about one major lesson I took from each of those interviews, and something that I wanted to expand on a little bit more now that it's been a few weeks since each of those interviews and discussions, and how I've kind of applied them. Now, for some of them, that lesson was quite unique and profound and something I hadn't thought of. For a lot of the lessons I'm going to share with you today were things that I already kind of knew, but maybe it was just a nice way to rethink about it or be reminded of it, which is often the case. And I think that's a lot of the value in these types of things is, when I listen to other powerlifting podcasts, it's very rare that I'm learning things that are new to me or totally foreign. And oftentimes it's reframing things or rewording things that I'm very familiar with, but from a different perspective, spoken using different words, and it can often be quite profound in that way. And so let's start with the first episode, which was with Billy, obviously my wife. And it'll come as no surprise that everything that she spoke about was stuff that we've spoken about 100 times over, because we've had these discussions and we've had these reflections and we share so much about this. And the lesson that I took from our episode was as follows. To have empathy, you need to be able to see things from your client's point of view. To have empathy, you need to be able to see things from your client's point of view. Now, when I say it out loud, it kind of sounds obvious. Like literally that is what empathy is. That's what it means to understand things, to be empathetic, right? You need to see things from your client's point of view. But this is such an important lesson because for me as a coach, this was something that I struggle with, or I did struggle with, and I'm a lot better at it now. I think as a young person, you only see things from your point of view in the world. Like literally that's the only way that you experience the world in your life. And so understanding that other people don't have it that way can be challenging. And I think it's only as you move through adulthood. And for some people, it's earlier. And for me, being the dumbass that I am, it took me longer than maybe it does for other people. But it took me, moving through adulthood to realize that, hey, the world isn't fair and some people just have different experiences of the world. And I could go into a bit of a rant about, political justice and social justice issues, which I will abstain from against my desires right now. But how does this all relate to coaching? Well, the first way was that as a young lifter, I was good. I was a good lifter. It didn't take me very long to get good. It didn't take a lot of effort for me to get good. Now, that's not to say that I wasn't training hard, and that's not to say that I wasn't training intelligently, but I had a lot of talent and I improved very quickly and things came very naturally to me. And so when I was an early coach, I found it very hard to coach people because they just weren't responding the way that I was expecting. I would give them instructions and they couldn't do it. Or they would do programs that I had done and they wouldn't improve very much. And that was very difficult for me to understand what was going on. And it's very difficult, more importantly, to understand things from their perspective and their experience of training. I liked training and I wanted to be really good. I wanted to be competitive. I was going to world championships. And so when other people didn't want that, it's not that I was confused. I didn't even realize they didn't want that. I didn't even realize that people didn't want to train really hard and get really good. And it's only now as an adult that I understand that everyone's experience of powerlifting is obviously different. What they want to get out of it is very different. Their rate of progression is going to be different. Their level of commitment is going to be different. And so that's like the most fundamental lesson I feel like that I learned very early in my powerlifting. And that's something that Bill and I spoke about quite a lot. I think the other part of my experience in learning empathy was that I was just a young coach. Like when I first started coaching, I was literally in my early 20s, 21, 22, which is the case for a lot of coaches, but it's not for everyone. You may have seen some memes. You may not have, if you're not necessarily in the fitness industry, about, like a 21-year-old personal trainer saying things like, we all have 24 hours in the day, telling like the mother of three that if you don't want this bad enough, then, you'll never get it. And lo and behold, I was that guy. Maybe not that extremely, but I, as a young person, didn't appreciate how hard it can be to train when you have other commitments, when you have work, when you have social commitments, when you have family commitments, when you have children, when you have other hobbies, when you have to maintain domestic duties, when you have so many other things. I didn't understand that. And so being empathetic, going back to the whole lesson, the lesson from this episode was to be empathetic, you need to be able to see things from your client's point of view. So how do you see things from your client's point of view? Well, I think the first thing is that comes with time and experience. For me, it did at least. Talking to so many people and listening to the complaints that people would share and the obstacles and hurdles that they would face and realizing, this is a bit of a pattern. A lot of people are struggling with this. I've never struggled with this, but a lot of people are. Okay, well then how can I as a coach help people get past this? Or this must be a lot more relevant than I realized it was, because it's not relevant to me in my personal life, but I'm seeing that it's relevant to other people. That's the first thing. I think another way that I improved on this in terms of seeing things from my client's point of view is just through reading and kind of movies a little bit, but a lot mainly through reading. I think one of the best things about reading, especially fiction, is it is one of the best ways to experience life from a different point of view. When you're reading a book, you're literally reading a story, oftentimes if it's written in the first person, from another person's point of view and their experiences of, what's happening in the story and whatever it might be. And so I actually think that's a really profound, almost like a mental shift in my development was like a way of one of the reasons why I like reading fiction is because it puts me in the shoes of other people. And then as I got older, I realized, wait a second, that's literally trying to be empathetic and understand people's point of view and understand the plights and the challenges that other people are facing. And so how this can be applied, I guess, in a more specific way is it can be things like understanding your client's point of view in the sense of, okay, this person is a mother of two and has these certain needs and desires and goals. It could also be that's like identity, but it can also be things like what they're wanting out of their training, how they want to go about it, approaching their training, the language they use, their religion and culture and upbringing, and understanding that if this person is super motivated just like me and they're talented just like me, but they come from a different culture where they might not have this certain level of, I don't know, background support or family support in strength sports or whatever it might be. There are so many factors that make our experiences of the world and training different. And so if you want to be a good coach, you need to have empathy. And in order to have empathy, you need to be able to see things from your client's point of view. Okay, in episode 2, I spoke with Jamie. And as of recording this episode very recently, Jamie announced that Melbourne Strength Culture will be closing its doors, which is very sad and something that I want to quickly touch on. If you go on Melbourne Strength Culture's Instagram page right now, where they made the announcement, go on Charlie's Instagram or Jamie's himself, you'll see the comment section is flooded with people commenting that Melbourne Strength Culture have been such a huge influence on the strength and fitness space in Melbourne and Australia in a broader sense. So my hat's off to them because it's a tough industry. And as we started at a very similar age, Jamie and I, in terms of training, we opened gyms at very similar times, myself about a year after. So we've very much grown up together. And they have, and he has, uh, been able to enjoy powerlifting for all that it is and strength training for all that it is. And so to see a gym closing down is obviously very sad, but I'm also very excited for them because making such a tough decision is, well, difficult, obviously. And I always congratulate people when they make tough decisions. So kudos to them. The lesson that I took from my discussion with Jamie was the following. The details matter, but they also don't. The details matter, but they also don't. When I was a young coach, and I've said this in a couple of the other episodes, so much of my development and learning was theoretical, so theoretical. It was learning biomechanics and learning about training principles and reading books. And I mean, this was before YouTube was so popular. So a lot of it was literally reading, reading books and articles and stuff online for sure. But it was very theoretical. It was about, joint angles and learning about anatomy and which muscles do what. And when I talked to Jamie and when I listened to the way that he views training and the physical movement, he very much has that theoretical base that we grew up with, even better than I do. And I've learned a lot from him. He has a very strong theoretical foundation, and he also has a very good framework with which he views training. But then when you talk to him about the application, when you ask him those questions, he kind of makes the joke that it kind of doesn't matter. And that, and I think I shared a reel, one of the highlights of our episode was him saying that, if my client wants to do sets of 5 on their program, well, the next program is going to be sets of 5. That is to say, it doesn't matter what the theory says. What matters is what they want to do. And this is such a shortcut to good coaching, because if you're a young coach, you could learn all the theory, but the theory almost gets totally displaced by the psychological, and we talked about the biopsychosocial model, but it gets totally displaced by the psychological perspective. And so the details about theory and adaptation and physiology and anatomy, those things do matter. If you want to be a good coach, you have to have those foundations. You have to understand what exercises do what, which muscle groups are working when you do certain exercises, how you can tweak the execution of an exercise to target different muscle groups, blah, blah, blah. That stuff does matter. But in many ways, it doesn't, because a lot of that stuff gets displaced when you are actually dealing with real world people who have psychological and social influences on their training. And when you're making decisions about someone's training, the small details like that, whether or not someone does a Bulgarian split squat with a weight in what left hand or right hand or at their chest or both hands, those details, like knowing what each of those slight variations does matter. But in many ways it doesn't. Like oftentimes I'll have people in the gym come to me and say like, hey, which handle should I use for cable rows? Or which grip should I use for lat pull downs? And I oftentimes shrug and say like, it doesn't really matter. Like, of course it matters in the sense of by doing a different grip, it will have a different effect. Like going wider will use more lats maybe and less biceps, and going underhand might hurt your elbow more. I know that theoretically, but objectively in terms of like your outcomes, it really doesn't affect your outcomes. And oftentimes my answer is whatever feels most comfortable with you. Or have you been doing the same attachment for the last 12 weeks? Okay, well, let's just swap it out. Let's have a bit of variation in your program. That's the complexity of my decision-making sometimes. And so yes, the details matter, but they don't. In my third episode, I spoke with Alex Hayes, of course, another longtime friend. And the lesson I took from our discussion was experience trumps all. Alex will be the first to tell you that he isn't the most technical or theoretical coach. In a contrast to Jamie, Alex is obviously very intelligent, but he doesn't have the deepest theoretical base. Don't get me wrong. He has a very, very good understanding of movement and training, and he's been a personal trainer and a coach for a very long time. But that's not the way that he positions himself in the industry as a theoretical wizard or a theoretical authority. But what he does have is a particular set of skills. That's a reference to a movie. I forget the name of the movie right now. Liam Neeson quote. But what he does have is a huge amount of experience. And one thing that I wanted to mention here in my language learning journey, as many of you may know, I like learning foreign languages. And there is a big language learning guy think of like, the Jamie Smiths and the Alex Hayeses of the language learning community. His name is Steve Kaufman, and he's learned like, 20 languages or whatever. And one thing that he says that's very important to learn language as well is an ability to notice. You need to notice the details. You need to notice if you're learning English as a foreign language, you need to notice when someone uses a versus an. And when you notice those differences, you're like, oh yeah, I see the pattern, and then you can start to apply them yourself. Heaps of experience is important to become a good coach, but it's kind of useless if you don't notice the details. And I think that's one of Alex's strengths, is that he has a very, very high ability to notice. Very, very good pattern recognition, very, very quick comprehension of what's happening around him or what he sees when someone's lifting. And when you have that ability to notice, when you have a healthy foundation of theory, and then you couple it with so much experience, so many comps, like it feels like he's at a local comp every freaking week in Sydney at the moment. So many hours in the gym, so many hours of online coaching. All of those hours add up to give you someone who is fluent in powerlifting. And that's what Alex is. He's fluent in powerlifting in the same way that you do not need to consciously think about the grammar you are using when you speak English, assuming you are a native English speaker. Someone like Alex understands lifting so much that I'm sure he has this experience, because I do too. Sometimes people will ask me like, how do I do this? Or why do I do this? Or why does this feel better? And blah, 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 blah. And sometimes my answer is like, I'm actually not sure, but I know it is the case. Or maybe a better example is I'll tell someone to widen their stance. Like they'll be squatting and it looks awkward. I say, okay, widen your stance and put your feet like this. And maybe like an intern or another coach in the gym says like, oh, how did you know? And I'll shrug. I'm like, the theory, I'm actually not 100% sure, but I just know because I've seen this like literally 1,000 times. And all the theoretical knowledge in the world is good because it gives you the ability to notice, but experience trumps all. Okay, in episode 4, I spoke with Victor, and the lesson I took there was your language matters. He tells a story in our episode about how he refers to his clients as lifters or athletes. He refers to them as athletes and not clients. And he tells us that even just that small word choice is a conscious decision by him, because he wants to frame his clients' experience of lifting as if they are athletes and they are people who are taking their training seriously, which they often are, of course. When I was a young coach, how do I say this? My personality would come out in my coaching very robustly, I suppose, to the point where I was not able to filter my personality and specifically my sense of humor based on the person in front of me. And I would use the same language like as a blanket. My sense of humor was like a blanket approach effectively. And it was over the years, kind of coupled with my discussion earlier about the improvement in my empathy. It took years and time and experience to realize, hey, I need to temper the way that I speak to people based on who they are, what they need, and what they want from their training and all that other stuff that I already mentioned. If 2 people in front of me fail their 3rd attempt squat in a competition, one of them, or what they need to hear from their coach when they walk off the platform after missing that 3rd squat, could be vastly different. And in the past, I used the same language. I just had a blanket approach. It was one of sarcasm, joking, jovial. Of course, like sometimes there was context would matter. If this was a really important thing and this person was really hyped up about it versus someone who was like just competing for fun and wasn't that invested or whatever it might be. Of course, there was going to be some marginal differences. But I guess my point here was it was a lot more subconscious or a lot more unconscious. Whereas the lesson that I took from speaking to Victor and the lesson that I've learned over the years is that your language matters. And so being very conscious about your word choice, about the tone of voice, about the perspective that you want to share with an individual. Do you want to, whether it's someone failing an attempt in a comp or they've come to you and they've shared that they are feeling really demotivated in their training right now and they want to change their training, or whether it's whatever it is that the discussion is at hand, the words you use, the way you say things, the perspective you provide is very important. I think coupled with this idea is the fact that we are authority figures in the lives of our lifters. Like even for lifters who are much older than I am, they look up to me, not literally because I'm 5'3", but they look up to me as an authority, as someone to guide them, as like, hey, what do I do? How do I do this? And in some ways, it's almost like soft parenting. Like you have this authority, you need to tell your lifters how to behave in the gym, especially, or in competitions, or what to do, or how to navigate the emotional hurdles and roller coasters of the experiences that they're having. And so being very conscious of that, and yeah, speaking in a way that's deliberate and considered, I think is really important, and something that I think a lot of young coaches don't take as seriously as they ought to. And so after speaking with Victor, it's very clear to me that your language matters and your word choice matters, and that's something that should be a very deliberate and conscious part of your coaching practice. Okay, in episode 5, are we up to episode 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we're up to episode 5. I spoke with Alex Della Portis, and the lesson that I took away from our discussion upon reflection was facilitate community and it will grow itself. That is, facilitate community and it will grow itself. He spoke a lot about the social side of his lifting and making training a fun experience. And, it's kind of related to the biopsychosocial model, which, again, I've spoken about in previous episodes. But the biopsychosocial model is an important part of a lifter's experience of powerlifting. Again, going back to what I said earlier, when I started lifting, I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be so good. I wanted to get so strong. I thought that's what mattered. And in many ways, it does matter, and it still does matter to me. And I think when a lot of people start their training, they also have that opinion in some way, even if it's not necessarily, I want to be the best, but they want to get stronger. Like when someone comes into the gym, into my gym specifically, very, very rarely do people walk in the gym and I say, what are your goals? Do they say, I want to make friends, or I want to have a community that feels good around me, or anything that's intangible like that? It's generally, I want to get stronger. I want to put on muscle. I want to do a competition. It's very like objective in that way. Part of the service or part of the experience that we provide our lifters, whether you're an online coach or a face-to-face coach, whether you own a gym or whether you're working in a gym or whatever is your involvement in a coaching kind of way or aspect, part of the experience that we provide, part of the service we provide our lifters is the experience of powerlifting in general. And that goes beyond spreadsheets. The lifter's experience of powerlifting is beyond the spreadsheet. And you as a coach have a huge influence on that lifter's experience. When I first opened the gym, of course, it was a very small business, I suppose. We had very few members. Like literally by definition on day one, we had 0 members because I wasn't transitioning out of another gym. I mean, I technically was, but I didn't have so many members there. So I think on day one, we had like literally three members. And within a month or two, that was up to like 20 or 30. But with such a small membership base, all the members kind of knew each other, and it was a very, very like tight-knit kind of community in that way. And I knew even from the beginning that was something that I wanted to facilitate, but I also know you can't force it. And so if you're a coach and you're thinking, how do I facilitate community? I suppose my suggestions will be, it has to be something that feels organic, but it needs to be deliberate. What do I mean? For example, at the gym, when we first opened, we weren't open in the mornings. So if you look on the Strength Fortress's website page or Google, you'll see that our opening hours in the afternoons are 4 till 9. That was how it was when we first started. We had no morning times. And during those hours, what that meant was that a lot of our members would run into each other. If you're training consistently, and I'm sure this experience is at whatever gym you train at, if you go to the gym at consistent hours, you're going to run into the same people again and again. And so that was like a deliberate choice that I made, was having relatively short hours, especially in one time slot. So that way it kind of like forces people to run into each other and to meet each other. And then from your point of view, you don't really need to do much in order for people to chat and get to know each other, because they're running into each other again and again. It just kind of happens on its own. And when I spoke to Alex, this was like a clear kind of like approach that he has, where you can't force people to be friends. You can't force people to have a community, but you need to give it opportunities. You need to, for example, he organizes his like PBs and Pints Day. He does his like social not running run club, stuff like that. Events where you're not forcing people to hang out, but the events are there. I think one of the big things that he did, especially early on, was that I think he did like free sessions at the gym at 3PP on Tuesday nights, and it would invite everyone. And it's not positioned as like, hey, come and be social. It's more like, come and join the crew and let's do some training together. And as a result of that, community's grown. And you do this every week, every Tuesday is free casuals or whatever. All of a sudden, your community kind of grows quite quickly, and everyone kind of gets to know each other, and you're running into the same people every week at the same time. And so the community kind of grows itself. As I guess like an expanded point of all this, like I said earlier, the external benefits, is that the right word? The benefits of powerlifting are clearly far beyond just getting stronger and getting more muscular and being a little bit healthier. The benefits of training extend far beyond that, and they do leak into other areas of our life, like, you know, the social side of things and the psychological side of things, and your psychological health and your social health. And so fundamentally, when I think about my role as a fitness professional, because that's what I am first and foremost, is a fitness professional, I think about how do I improve my lifter's physical strength, and that's understanding programming and understanding biomechanics and all that kind of stuff we did before. But realizing actually I have a very powerful role to play in someone's experience of, or someone's social health and someone's psychological health. You know, for a lot of people, training at a gym is the only community that they are part of outside of work. And for a lot of people, if they're working as freelancers or on their own or working from home, they might not really get much of a community element outside. And so the community side of things is actually just, to me anyway, personally, it's just so important to realize that providing that for people isn't a byproduct of your training, but it is literally like a fundamental aspect of your training. And I could go on about this forever, but I will try not to. So yeah, from Alexander Della Portis' episode, facilitate community, and it will grow itself. Okay, in the next episode, I spoke to Jack Dunn from Tasmania. That was a great episode. I mean, so they all were really. And this one went quite long, I remember, about an hour and a half. And the lesson that I wanted to share with you today that I took from that episode is don't be afraid to dream big. Don't be afraid to dream big. I think for a long time, even more recently, to be honest, not so much early on, but more recently, I'm very conscious about tempering the expectations of the lifters I coach and the people that come into the gym. You don't want to have someone walk in the gym and you promise them the world and tell them they're going to be Australian champion one day and XYZ, when that's not, one, not likely, but B, not relevant, C, not likely. And so I'm very conscious of that. And so I think a lot of coaches are, a lot of coaches are very conscious about the words they use and what they're telling their lifters and where they're guiding them. And I asked Jack about this a little bit. He's got a number of lifters that are seeing some really, really good success. And I said, is it dangerous to, I don't know, these aren't my exact words. I don't remember what they were, but you can go back and listen to the episode if you would like. But I said something to the effect of, is it dangerous to plant in people's minds the idea of going to nationals and going to worlds and wearing the Australian soft suit when you don't know if that's going to be a possibility? And his description was that it's like giving a lifter a North Star, something to work towards. And it's not necessarily the goal, but that's what I'm working towards. That's what motivates me. That's the driver behind my training right now. And if that motivates someone and pushes them forward, whether or not they get there is kind of irrelevant. What matters is that they've at least got a reason to come and do the training, and they've got something to work towards. If you've been in the strength/powerlifting space for a number of years, you might know the name Greg Knuckles. He was much more vocal online as a content creator. Could you call it a content creator? I guess so. Many years ago, maybe more like, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I suppose, 6 years ago. I think he's still active, but Greg Knuckles shared a post on Facebook, can you believe? So many years ago. And it was about this, basically this topic. And he said something to the effect of like, he was of the opinion that letting lifters dream big is like so good for them. And it's not something that we need to beat out of people. I'm not wording this very well. The example he used was, he said, when I started lifting, this is roughly what he said, but he said, when I started training, I wanted to be like Ronnie Coleman, the Mr. Olympia champion. I wanted to be the biggest, like most muscular guy in the world. Now that wasn't ever possible, but I didn't know that. I started training, 3 months later, I started seeing muscles. I'm like, oh my God, if I keep going, I could get really big and strong. And that's what I wanted. And so it motivated me, and I would train with this vision of getting there. Now I never got there, but as a young, young in the sense of in your training age, as a young trainee, that level of delusion is kind of enjoyable. It's kind of fun to live in that period. And so now I'm talking from my point of view, not from his point of view. now I kind of look at it a little bit like, if you've ever bought like tickets to like the lottery or like a really big raffle or something, you start to get those visions, like what if I actually won? Like what if I actually won $5 million? And although you never do, that little bit of period of hope where you start visioning your life is kind of nice. It's kind of fun. It's fun to think about and dream about the likelihood of you actually winning that. Like your perception of the likelihood of you winning the lottery is probably a lot higher than the reality of it. And so in that little window, it's just fun. And so if you've got lifters who are dreaming and are a little bit delusional, I think in the past, I would be very quick to like put that out and say like, hey, let's not get our hopes up. Let's not get so distracted by that. Let's just get some training in, enjoy your experience, blah, blah, blah. And that's important too. Like we do need to, as coaches, we do need to manage our lifters' experience and manage their expectations and guide them and mentor them and all that kind of stuff. But in a small way, letting those lifters have that deluded hope that the dream of getting somewhere where others don't think they can get, in some way, I don't think it's fair for us to take that away from them in that little window when they believe it's possible, because they'll realize eventually, reality comes crashing down eventually. But letting them believe that, not encouraging it or not necessarily, not in a way that's unhealthy, of course. But yeah, I'm kind of like rambling right now, but I do think that Jack's perspective here on let that be the North Star, let that guide the training, and doesn't have to be the goal or the objective whereby if this isn't achieved, then we are a total failure, but it guides the process. And I think that level of optimism and enthusiasm and hope for the future, I suppose, can actually be a healthy thing, and it can kind of help people move forward. And so the lesson I took from my episode with Jack Dunn was don't be afraid to dream big. In my episode with Daniel Featherston, my lesson is we are educators first and foremost. Dan spoke extensively about how important it is to educate and how important it is to explain things, and that if he's teaching someone an exercise, he likes to teach them the why and show them how and answer questions in detail. And he said that sometimes his sessions would go so long because he just talks and explains things. And that was a nice reminder to me that, at the core of it, in many ways, we are educators. We know things about training that our clients don't know. Our clients are often very educated people and intelligent people, of course, but they don't know the details of training. And so part of being a good coach is being an educator. And I think that education also emanates passion. When you speak to your lifters with the energy that he spoke about teaching them these details, and he said, teaching's fun. Like learning's fun. Learning new things is fun. And if this person is showing interest in powerlifting or strength training or whatever it is, and they're obviously interested in it. So if you're showing them these details, these educational points, they'll enjoy that. They get better buy-in and they learn a lot. Now, I do want to make a little caveat here, because one of my little points, and this is something I've thought about for a long time. This isn't new. I've never made a post about this, but I'd like to one day, is that there's this old saying that knowledge is power. And I don't know if I fully believe that in some ways. And the reason is because, yes, I suppose knowledge is power, but oftentimes knowledge isn't enough. Knowing things is not enough to change behaviors. And I learned this mainly through psychology and my interest in psychology. Now, extra caveat on the caveat. I have never studied psychology in a formal sense. But if you look into any psychologists in the world, you can come at me and tell me if I'm wrong in what I'm about to say. But if you look at fields of psychology that deal with behavior, like especially like behavioral psychology, and you look at cognitive biases. When you look at like cognitive biases, one of the things that I find so fascinating is that a person's knowledge of a cognitive bias does not make them immune to that bias. So for example, if you know about the peak recency bias effect, that is your memory and experience of a experience, your memory and recollection of an experience is biased towards what was the peak emotion and the end of that experience. Those things have a bigger impact on the way you just talk about that experience than like the average of it. So for example, this is a huge detour by the way, but stay with me. If someone's married for 10 years and they had such a great relationship, but at the end of it, it ended horribly, that end bit has such a impact on their memory of the whole relationship, where 95% of the relationship was genuine bliss, but 5% of it at the end was terrible. This person doesn't look back fondly on the relationship, and instead they look on it, with bitterness. Anyway, even if you know about this as a bias, that doesn't actually, protect you from falling for that bias. And this is true of a lot of different types of cognitive biases. And so when I learned about this many years ago, about this effect of knowledge or knowing about a bias doesn't protect you from the bias, it kind of made me realize that, knowing things doesn't actually protect you, or doesn't actually, isn't enough, essentially. Another great example, and any food people, nutritionists, especially food psychologists, come and correct me on this. Another example I find for this is when it comes to nutrition. When I'm not a nutrition coach, I don't pretend to be, but I am interested in food psychology. And when someone is struggling with their weight, or they ask, or this was especially early on in my experience as coaching, one thing I noticed is that a lot of times people, especially people who are like overweight and have poor eating habits, oftentimes they know that their eating habits are bad. If someone doesn't eat breakfast and then their lunch is like 2 bowls of like Cocoa Pops, and then they get Uber Eats for dinner, their problem isn't that they don't know what to do. Like, they know that they should have some eggs for breakfast, and they should have some yogurt, and then they should probably cook a home, like a fresh meal for dinner. Like, that's knowledge that they have. Someone who eats badly knows that they shouldn't have a whole pizza and 6 beers for dinner on a Wednesday, right? But they still do it. And so when I look at like people's behavior in that way, it's clear to me that knowledge isn't enough. You actually have to have, like, what drives behavior is so much more complicated than simply knowing things. You actually have to have like a fundamental look at internal motivators, and it goes much more complicated and way beyond what I'm able to share about today. So that massive detour takes us back to my discussion and my lesson from Daniel Featherstone, which is that we are educators, and that, yes, of course, education is a huge part of what we do, but it's often not enough. Telling someone, if you train 3 days a week, every week for 2 years straight, you will make awesome gains. If you do these exercises, blah, 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 blah. That's great. And that does help people, I think. And I'm not saying it doesn't help people. I think it can be very motivating. It can be very inspiring when lifters know this exercise trains your glutes. Great. Like, they're so motivated to do that because they really want to grow their glutes. That can be a great motivator. But as much as my lesson from Dan was that we are educators, it's also that education is not enough. And that's maybe the extension of the lesson that I want to share with you today. Education is not enough. You actually have to look at there are deeper drivers to our behavior, and having a small understanding of what is driving people's behavior, whether you're a powerlifting coach or a nutrition coach, or even in any kind of field where you're like dealing with people and trying to help them, you need to understand that just knowing things is not enough. People still behave in ways that are contrary to their knowledge. And so if you want to help people, you do need to understand that, there's more to people's behavior than that. Okay, and also an extension on this whole discussion that I have written down here is a little bit of my personal experience in coaching, is that I think there was a period where I took education too far, and I felt like it was my role to educate everything. When I first started, when I was learning about training and learning about the gym and stuff, a lot of my lessons, especially early days, I'm talking like when I was a genuine teenager, when I was like 13, 14, 15, 16, it was like reading crap articles on the internet and fucking around in the gym, mind my language, doing random shit, buying stuff, bumbling my way through things, jamming my fingers in between machines, hurting myself in some ways. And I think there's also a lot of value in letting people make those mistakes. And so there was a period, especially early on in my coaching, where I would try to like correct everything and like make sure everything was perfect, and I'd want to be the best coach ever in that way. But then I kind of realized in time that actually that almost robs some people of their experience. It actually robs amateur lifters of the self-discovery, like of them figuring it out. So for example, sometimes people will come to me and be like, hey, I've got dumbbell shoulder press. What weight should I use? It would be easy for me to say, hey, start with 15 kgs. But sometimes I'm like, have a go. Whatever you think. Try. Figure it out. Have a guess. and let them bumble their way through it, because, we live in a world where it's so easy to offload or to, what's the word? Outsource decision making. Hey, ChatGPT, how do I do this thing? What should I say in this context? Or Googling things is so easy. And I think some of that decision making and lessons in the gym can also be outsourced. Members in the gym or clients coming up to me and saying, hey, what do I do here? Or how do I how do I adjust this machine? Sometimes I don't tell them how to adjust the machine, especially if I'm busy. I can use that as an excuse. Give me 1 minute, try and figure out yourself. I'm busy with this other person right now. But I often actually look at that as like, no, I'm not fobbing you off because I'm busy. I'm actually giving you the opportunity to figure it out yourself. This is part of the gym experience, is bumbling your way through things. And in many ways, I look at that as like, well, this is how I'm educating you. All right? I can educate you by explicitly telling you what weight to use or how to use the machine, but I can educate you by giving you the opportunity to figure it out yourself. And so as a lifter like grows through their lifting journey and their experience, they can learn all these things for themselves, but they also have to be given the opportunity to figure out themselves. Okay, that was a big one. My next episode 8, was with Kelly Mann. And that was a really interesting episode. And the lesson that I took from that was, growth comes from an unwavering desire to understand the problem in front of you. I know that's a long one. Growth comes from an unwavering desire to understand the problem in front of you. One thing that stood out to me when I spoke to Kelly was how much she wanted to understand what was going on. She would outsource. She would speak to other coaches. I know she has relationships with numerous other high-level coaches, both in Australia and outside of Australia. He admits her deficiencies as a coach and says, I do not understand what the hell is going on here. I need help. And I want to understand. She had this desire to learn, a willingness to outsource. And this is always something that I struggled with because, I don't know, ego. I'm a dumbass. And I wanted to figure things out for myself, or I wanted to know things for myself, or I wanted to pretend that I didn't not know things, maybe. Yeah, hard to say why. But outsourcing was definitely something that I struggled with for a long time. I'm a lot better at it now, but I'm still not great. And I think it can be easy to dismiss the problems that you see in front of you. So when lifters are struggling with certain technical issues, they may be plateauing on a certain exercise, I find it easy to dismiss these issues as like, these are just going to happen and it's not that big a deal. Whereas I think like one of Kelly's strengths is that she looks at like someone plateauing as like, no, this is not acceptable. I need to fix this. She looks at someone having mild elbow pain as, this is not acceptable. Let's fix this. Whereas I can be a little bit like relaxed on that maybe and say, easy. And I don't think my approach is bad. It's just that I don't, approach things in this like total desire to fix everything in front of you the way that she does. So, I think that was like an important and interesting thing to take away from our discussion, that growth comes from an unwavering desire to understand the problem in front of you. Okay, on to the last episode, which was my episode with Tyler. This was episode 9. Bodybuilding is glorified eating disorder. We didn't talk about this a lot, but this was like the first thing that kind of come up. If you listen to the episode, it was like the first few minutes. And I mean, this is something that I've known for a long time, and this is like been in my opinion for a very long time. But there are very few people that approach bodybuilding with there are very few people that approach bodybuilding with a healthy approach to nutrition and body image. And, I have seen the negative impact that bodybuilding training and bodybuilding style, training or signing up for a bodybuilding show and stuff, the negative impact that can have on someone's mental health, on their body image. Again, winding right back to the first point about empathy, I never struggled with body image, like not even a little bit, like of course I wanted to put on more muscle and stuff, but I've just never been conscious of like the way I looked and what my body looks like. And it was through growing up and understanding the world around me and empathizing, especially the experience that I had with my younger sister who had an eating disorder when we were young. I was too young and immature to understand what I was looking at right in front of me, which is very embarrassing and a story for another time. And learning a lot from Billy, who also had an eating disorder as a teenager and as a young adult. I've really learned and understood how powerful food hang-ups, disordered eating cycles, the psychology around food. I've learned a lot about that and how that influences our mental health and our physical health, of course. And again, I'm no expert on food psychology, and I don't offer any nutrition coaching. And I do stay, I like to stay in my lane in that sense, but it is something that's very obvious and relevant. One of my favorite things about powerlifting and strength training is that it detaches lifting weights from what you look like in many ways. A lot of people start lifting weights and going to the gym because it's going to improve the way that they look. When you're a kid, you don't sign up for sports because you want to look like an athlete. Like, I didn't start playing Aussie rules football thinking I want to look like some professional footballer. I didn't start doing athletics because I wanted to look like Usain Bolt or whoever it was at the top of the time. I did athletics. I played football because I wanted to get good at those things. As an adult, like when someone transitions into adulthood and they stop doing sports, maybe you played basketball as a kid or you played cricket or whatever it is, you kind of stop doing sports for a while. And then eventually at some point as an adult, you realize, hey, I should go to the gym. I'm out of shape. And a lot of people approach the gym as a mechanism to lose weight, to put on muscle, to look better, to feel better. Unfortunately, though, that has negative consequences. Now, whether or not you are doing bodybuilding, like in the discussion that I had with Tyler, or on one end of the spectrum, or if you're on the other end of the spectrum, which is much more tame, but still in the same vein of I want to look better and lose fat and feel better about myself, that can have negative impacts on our self-image, body image, on our relationship with our body, relationship with food. I've been very blessed to be able to help numerous people with their relationship with food and realizing that, and the relationship with exercise, I think is probably the more important point here. Coming at it from a point of you are lifting weights to improve your performance, to increase a number on the bar. I do not care what you look like. And because I do not care what you look like, that has this flow-on effect to them. This conveys the message to them that I shouldn't care what I look like, that it shouldn't be relevant to me what I look like. What matters is, can I lift this weight? Am I getting stronger? Am I improving? Now, of course, part of being a good athlete, part of getting stronger is having good power to weight ratio, carrying muscle. If you want to fit into your weight class and be competitive, it's losing body fat. Of course, there's an element to that there, but that isn't the goal. Just like when you're preparing for a marathon or if you're playing competitive, any sport, of course, being leaner and fitter and carrying less body fat is going to be good for you, right? But that's not the goal in of itself. It's like a byproduct, or it's not even a byproduct, but it's like a secondary goal to help the main goal, which is performance. Nobody's ever run a 3-hour marathon with a 30 BMI. Or at least I don't think so. I can't imagine that being the case. Like, nobody overweight runs 3-hour marathons. It just doesn't happen that way. So of course being lean is going to be helpful, but that's not the goal. You're not saying I want to lose weight to look good. You're saying I'm losing weight because it's going to help my performance. So it's just that total shift in mindset is just so healthy for so many people. And so, yeah, the lesson I guess I took from Tyler's episode, or at least a lesson that can be taken from there, is that bodybuilding is a glorified eating disorder. And I'm very, I feel very blessed in many ways, or it feels very aligned with my values that I coach powerlifting, because of course I enjoy it and I see the value in powerlifting, and I see the value in strength training. But as it relates to body image and relationships with food and whatnot, the fact that somebody can get so much value from their training and reclassify and reposition their experience of the gym to be one of performance and not of what I look like, I think can be very powerful. Okay, the 10th episode is this one. And so you're getting a bonus lesson. And the lesson is from myself and something that I've spoken to with clients so many times in the past. Lesson is this: things will never slow down. Things will never slow down. Whatever your goals may be, go to nationals, win a nationals, go to worlds, deadlift 500 pounds for the first time, squat 100 kilos for the first time, whatever it might be. It requires effort. It requires time. Your goals could be outside of that. It could be, I want to learn this language like I have, or it could be, I want to buy my first house, or I want to get this promotion, whatever it might be. It requires time. It requires effort. It requires consistency. It requires dedication. We know all that kind of stuff. Life gets in the way. All right. Last weekend, I had a wedding to go to. It was a destination wedding, albeit an hour and a half drive from home, but nevertheless, spent 2 nights away. Next weekend, There's a competition that I've got to go to on a weekend. The weekend after, it's your someone's birthday. The weekend after, it's your cousin's dog's birthday. The weekend after is Christmas. And then after that, XYZ happens. Life never slows down. Things are always going to get in the way. And this was like a lesson I learned, especially through online coaching. And it's actually one that Bill and I kind of came up with together, although it was mainly her who really taught me this, is that if you want to be successful and you want to achieve those goals that I outlined earlier, you do have to at some point accept that things won't get easier. You just have to adapt and make it fit into your schedule. The amount of times that I've had conversations with clients, with lifters, who say things like, oh, I know I've been missing training. Like, I know I keep missing my day 4, but like October is just such a busy month and things will calm down next month. And then the next month comes and then things pop up. New events come up, work events come up. They get held back at work and something else happens and their car breaks down and whatever bullshit it is. It's not bullshit. I mean, they're relevant. I mean, they are real, I guess, excuses, I suppose, real hurdles. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's been so hard to get in my training. Like November has been such a busy month, but I know December, I've got nothing in December, so it should be calm. And then Christmas parties arrive and then Christmas and then your partner's birthday. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I missed 2 weeks of training. December was just insane, but I know January will be quiet. The amount of times that I've had this conversation is like mind-boggling to me. And so the lesson that I want you to take from what I'm discussing right now is that things will not slow down. If you want to achieve whatever it may be, you have to make the time, make the effort in your calendar. We all have 24 hours. No, I'm joking. I'm not going to say that. Of course, we all have our own personal hurdles to overcome. You may have kids. You may have to look after an elderly parent. You might have to work long hours, extra time, overtime to put food on the table. You may have injuries. You may have long distances to commute to make it to work or to make it to the gym. You may have some plethora of genuine reasons why getting training in or whatever your goals may be. But from a training point of view, getting your training in is difficult. Very genuine reasons. You might have genuine hurdles that are what feel transient. They feel temporary. Oh, it's just this month. Like this month is busy because I have this on some work project or whatever. That may be true. And you may not have a work project to do next month, but next month something else will probably come up. And these things will always come up, I guess is my point. And so you need to be ready to manage either your expectations and realize, hey, I just can't achieve the things that I thought I was going to achieve because I'm realizing my life's a lot busier than I thought it was. Or you have to manage your work schedule or your other commitments, whatever they may be, in such a way to make time for your training. Making time for training is freaking easy when you're 21 years old and you live at home and you don't pay bills. And it is a lot harder when you are a grown up and you have all those commitments that I mentioned earlier. And that's very fair and relevant. But things will just never slow down until you retire. But even then, I have clients that are retired and they are busy. I don't know how, but they're busy. My mom's retired and she's freaking busy. And so making the time in your schedule and finding a way to make it practical, #practical powerlifting, making it practical, making it reasonable, making it digestible for you, I think is very important. So don't get, I guess my lesson or my message to you is don't get sucked into thinking that next month will be easier, because it won't be. It's always going to be busy. If you're a busy person, you're just a busy person. If you are social, you have a social life. If you have kids, your kids will always be there. This week is, school production, and next month is exams, and then the month after is footy finals, and the month after, it's just always going to be going on. And so those things won't go away. Do not get sucked into thinking that they will go away. Always have a practical plan for how you're going to get your training in and how you're going to get the best out of your training, and you will be more likely to succeed. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. A little bit of a rogue one, a little bit of a solo episode. I'm impressed with myself. Right on an hour. That's pretty good. Yeah, it's been an awesome 10 episodes. This weekend, I'm competing for the first time in 12 months, so go me. I'm looking forward to that. It's at Stronghold Ballarat, so if you happen to be listening to this on the 7th of November, which is the day that this episode comes out, I'll be competing tomorrow, but if you listen to this anytime after that, you will have missed it. So if you are listening to this on the 7th of November, try to come out to Stronghold Ballarat and watch what will be a great comp. There'll be a lot of good lifters. Next week, I will have some more episodes for you ready to come out on Friday, as always. I hope you found this episode useful. I'd be looking forward to hearing some feedback. I will say, if you're still listening at this point, I will say that making this podcast, it's been 10 episodes. It's been challenging. Like, it's been fun, but it's been challenging. The time commitment is obviously very high, like literally recording episodes, editing the episodes, making the reels and stuff. It's time consuming. I have in the last few weeks received a couple of very nice compliments that have been genuinely motivating, like disproportionately motivating. For example, I visited Nexus powerlifting gym yesterday just to go in and say hello. And I saw a chap, Ben, who, if you're listening, what's up, who I haven't seen in many years. We're not particularly friends in any way, but I recognize his face and he recognized mine, obviously. And he said, "Oh man, I've been listening to your podcast. It's been really good." That little comment just was like, "Oh my God, I've got to keep going. Like, I need to keep up the energy. I need to keep up the motivation because there are people listening and that are enjoying this." And yeah, so if you've enjoyed the episode, send me some feedback, send me a nice DM because it'll make my day. Send me good luck for my comp tomorrow. That's all I've got for you today. I appreciate your time and I will talk with you all soon. Cheers.